Welcome to Module 4. This is where we're going to build your first finance agent. The course is going to stop being theoretical and start being practical. Up to now, you've learned how AI thinks, how to choose the right workflow, and how to map a process like an agent designer. Now we're going to turn all of that blueprint into a working AI agent. By the end of this module, you will have an agent that accepts real finance data, follows explicit rules, produces structured output, and behaves predictably enough that you'd actually trust it with part of your job. No coding, no magic, just a good design. So let's start by designing the agent blueprint. Every strong agent starts with a blueprint. Think of this exactly like writing a job description. If you've ever onboarded a new analyst, you already know how to do this. If the role is vague, the output will be vague. If the rules are fuzzy, the agent will freestyle, and that's how hallucinations happen. So what is the agent blueprint? It's going to have your role, responsibilities, inputs, outputs, and guardrails. First, you need to define the agent's role. Your agent needs a single, clear job. Not you help with finance stuff, but you are a finance analyst supporting monthly variance analysis for FP&A leadership. That role definition anchors everything the agent does. Second, we need to define responsibilities. Responsibilities answer the question, what is this agent allowed to do and what isn't it? Examples include identifying material variances, classifying drivers, drafting commentary, summarizing data. But notice what's missing. Posting journal entries, approving payments, or touching anything transactional. Agents assist, humans decide. Defining inputs. Agents are only as good as the inputs you give them. Be explicit. What file format? What structure? What columns matter? If the agent needs actuals versus budget, if it needs a mapping table, include it. Inputs can include things like Excel, CSV files, PDFs, PowerPoint decks, emails, tables, policy manuals, or specific instructions and SOPs you've written. Next, define the outputs. What does done look like? Agents don't know what you want unless you tell them. Do you want bullet points versus paragraphs? Do you want a summary versus painstaking detail? Do you want a table versus a narrative? Ambiguous output instructions lead to creative writing, not finance deliverables. Now your outputs, they can include commentary, tables, PowerPoint slides, summaries, really anything that you need, you just have to define it. And lastly, guardrails and non-negotiables. This is where finance agents become safe and you make sure you don't make any InfoSec people cry. Guardrails are the hard limits. Never invent numbers. Only use provided data. Cite your sources. Ask questions and stop and get a human if you're unsure. Think of guardrails kind of like internal controls. They're boring, but they're absolutely essential and most importantly, career saving. So now that we're ready to build our agent, we need to create an agent blueprint. This is going to take the requirements that we built and translate them into the actual structure that we're going to use inside OpenAI Agent Builder to build the agent. So again, the requirements are the technical document. The blueprint is how we're going to actually construct an agent that meets those requirements inside the Agent Builder. So the first thing we want to do in ChatGPT, we're going to go ahead and add our requirements. Okay, so we've attached our requirements here, and then let's pop in the prompt. Act as a skilled financial analyst. Using the agent requirements I provided via attachment, create a blueprint for my AI agent. I will be building the agent in OpenAI Agent Builder. The blueprint needs to include the role, the responsibilities, the inputs, the workflow, the outputs, and the guardrails. Ask me any questions you need to give the best possible output. We'll send that away, and we'll let ChatGPT do its magic. All right, and it's jumping right into the blueprint. So here's our role. I analyze actuals versus budget, identify the real drivers, and write concise, board-ready variance commentary with consistent tone and logic. Here's my different responsibilities, and you'll notice the really cool thing it's doing is it's providing a citation to the requirements to confirm for us that it's going to meet it. Here's all of the inputs that are going to be required. Both required and optional inputs are down here. And then we've got the workflow. So this is what we're actually going to build. So step 0, setup and sanity checks. It's going to compute the variances in step 1. It'll do materiality filtering in step 2, then driver classification, logic sources for the classification. It'll prioritize and it will remove duplicates. It'll generate the narrative. Note it has our tone rules down here. And then it will package up the outputs. Here it confirms what the outputs are going to be: executive ready monthly variance commentary, and then all of the different guardrails that we need to build in. And down here, so remember, we leave it open to always say, hey, if you have any questions, ask us. So here are the quick questions just asking us so we can tighten the build. Answer whatever you can, bullets are fine. So materiality thresholds, what's worth talking about? So let's say materiality threshold is $5,000. I want it by location and by total company. You haven't seen this yet, but we're going to be doing this for a chain of coffee shops, the F9 Finance coffee shop chain. So we want this by location, not necessarily by function. All right, then we're going to come down here. Our preferred output format, paragraph and bullets will be great. Expenses are favorable when lower, and revenue favorable when higher. Let's see, context sources. How will you feed one-time items business events? Let's say, do we want to do a text box or a table? Let's do a table. Context will be provided in a Word document. Do you want the agent to generate a questions back to FP&A list when context is missing? No. Work with what you've got. Okay, so we've answered the questions it had for us. We'll send it back and we'll see what updates it does for us. All right, and here it is. It's coming back. So you'll see a lot of this is stuff that we'd already had. It's just tweaking. So now it says apply a $5,000 materiality threshold. Here we've got the clear narrative, 1 paragraph and bullet highlights. Use context in the Word document when available. And this is a great guardrail. Otherwise, I explain strictly from the numbers without making stuff up. Again, we've got some tweaks here based on the information we gave it. There's the 5,000. There's the optional context. Our workflow has been tweaked ever so slightly. All right, here's the outputs. And then the guardrails, again, have been tweaked. I like this, the don't embarrass me in front of the CFO section. And builder ready format instructions. So it's saying in OpenAI Agent Builder, here's how I'd structure it. And that's our blueprint. So now we've got the document that we can take right to OpenAI Agent Builder to build this up. Again, you're not alone in this building process. We're going to be using AI along the way to support us in the entire development. It's a friend right here who knows everything about building agents because it is an AI tool. And in this case, we're using ChatGPT from OpenAI to talk about Agent Builder from OpenAI. It knows everything about it, and it's going to help us every step of the way. Next, we need to write effective system instructions. System instructions, are also known as the system prompt, is the agent's brain. The system instructions define the role of the agent, the tone with which they speak and respond, the rules that they follow, and their behavior. The system instruction is by far the single most important part of your agent. If you get this wrong, the agent's wrong. This is not a prompt you treat casually. This is the agent's operating manual. Everything you mapped in Module 3 now gets translated into instructions. Starting with finance tone and structure. Finance outputs need to be clear, concise, neutral, and decision-oriented. Tell the agent to avoid hype, avoid speculation. Use professional finance language. Otherwise, you're going to get Silicon Valley optimism instead of financial realities. It's critical that you use templates for reliability. Templates are how you use randomness. Instead of something vague like write commentary, you give headings, a bullet structure, ordering rules. Remember that structure creates consistency, which is what finance teams trust. Reliability patterns can include things like step-by-step reasoning, explicit rules of how to operate, even output templates to make sure you get exactly what you're looking for. And most importantly, fallback behavior when things don't go as planned. So let's look at a bad prompt versus a good prompt. Here's a bad prompt. Explain the variances. Well, what is the agent going to do with that? So here's a good one. Using the attached actual versus budget file, identify the top 5 material variances by absolute dollar amount. For each, classify the driver and draft 1 to 2 bullet points using neutral finance language. Only use numbers from the file. So now, using the agent blueprint we built, we have to do one last really critical thing before we start constructing, and that's to build the system prompt. The system prompt is the brains of the agent. It's what's going to control kind of the main agent. In the example we saw in Module 0, when we had the CFO agent, the system prompt would be driving the CFO agent, and you'd have separate prompts to drive the specialized helper agents. So this is the brains of the main agent that's going to do the thinking, the processing, the planning. So we want to get it right. So we just did the blueprint up here, and ChatGPT can read up and see what it just gave us. So we can go ahead and just stick our prompt in. This one will be a touch longer because we want to give it some kind of bounds around the answer we'll get back. So act as a skilled financial analyst. Using the agent blueprint you helped me create the master system prompt for my agent. I will be building the agent in OpenAI Agent Builder. The system prompt needs to include the role, the tone, the rules, and the behavior. Make sure the prompt is reliable, including step-by-step reasoning, explicit rules, output templates, and fallback behavior. And then ask me any questions you need to give the best possible output. We'll send that away and we'll let it do its magic. All right, and you'll notice that system prompts, because it's kind of a core part, because it's essentially coding the agent, often it will come back in a coding format from ChatGPT. And so here's our system prompt. You are an FP&A variance commentary analyst AI agent. Here's our role. Here's our tone. All of this is being written in a way that the AI agents will be able to clearly understand. Core definitions. Here's the reliability rules, so things we need the agent to do every single time. Then we've got our behavior. So we want to ingest and normalize. We want to compute variances. We want to apply materiality filtering, rank the drivers, incorporate the context notes if available, draft the narrative blocks, and then output. There's also going to be this fallback behavior for when inputs are messy. So this will be things like if a location is in actuals but missing in budget, note that budget is not available, don't make it up. If budget is 0, the variance percent is NA. If account mapping rollups are missing, work with the most granular level. So there's some great stuff here. And then here's an exact output template we wanted to use. We want it to come out in a usable format every single time. And then some extra guardrails. Do not provide investment advice. Do not fabricate operational explanations. Do not output the reasoning unless requested. And do not ask questions in the final output. So that's our system prompt. It's ready to go. I'm going to show you exactly where to put in Agent Builder, but that's everything we need to actually start building. So let's go ahead and start building. Once your system prompt's done, you need to add knowledge and context. Agents should not rely on memory or vibes. They rely on documented knowledge. Knowledge sources can include things like policies, SOPs, checklists, sample outputs from prior periods. Anything the agent must reference belongs in its knowledge base. This could include things like treasury policies, accounting rules, prior decks, notes from executives on how they want things, standard commentary examples from successful presentations. This is how you prevent "that's not how we do it" moments. Structured data like Excel is great for numbers. Unstructured data like policies and emails is great for rules and context. And your agent needs both structured and unstructured data. Next, we need to teach your agent how to handle financial data. An agent can read Excel and Google Sheets. It can compare data sets. It can summarize trends in your data. It can even classify variances. This is where the agent stops being a writer and becomes an analyst. When you pass structured data, you're telling the agent these numbers are the source of truth. You should always instruct it on where totals live, how to treat missing values that it would expect, and how to rank importance. This keeps your analysis consistent. For FP&A, you can do things like actuals versus budget, to the variance, to the commentary. For treasury, you can do bank balances to thresholds to generate alerts. For accounting, you can look at reconciliation data, generate the differences, and provide explanations. It's all the same mechanics, just across different domains. Now, it's time to build. I'm going to walk you through creating a basic agent step by step using ChatGPT's Agent Builder. We're going to define the role, we're going to put in our system instructions that we've written, we're going to upload our sample data, and we're going to run the agent. And lastly, and most importantly, we're going to refine the output of the agent. This is the moment where most people say, yes, agents are easy if the design is good, and a good design beats complexity every single time. Now, to build our agent in OpenAI's Agent Builder, the first thing we need to do is set up an account. Now, there's a small chance you may already have one, but the thing is, despite both ChatGPT and Agent Builder coming from OpenAI, you don't access Agent Builder through ChatGPT. So you may need a separate account, and I'm going to show you where to set that up. So here we are on ChatGPT again. This isn't where Agent Builder is. We need to go to platform.openai.com. Now, when you get here, if you don't have an account, you'll just need to hit this sign up button right here. Go through the steps. You're really just going to give it your organization name, set up a username and password. Once you've either logged in or set up your account, you're going to get to this screen, and this is the OpenAI platform. Now, you're going to see a lot of stuff you can click on here. You're going to see a lot of information. For the purposes of this, we're going to specifically focus on this section down here called Agents, and more specifically, this button that says Build Agents. Now, just to let you know, I like you to understand what you're looking at. This screen is where you can get to the APIs for OpenAI. Now, what is an API? Well, this is the technical way to come in and to use a software from another platform. What this allows you to do is it allows you to connect OpenAI models like ChatGPT 5.2, ChatGPT 4.0, whatever you want, to other software. There's a lot of platforms now that have AI tools built in, but they still need a reasoning model. They still need an actual model to run the queries and to process tokens, as we learned about in Module 1. And this is the way for developers to connect that all in. And actually, in the bonus module at the end of this course, when we learn how to use workflow tools like N8N and Zapier, this is how you would connect an OpenAI model to those. So that's why you see so much going on here, because it's all about those different models and how to connect it and all the things you can do with it. But again, for us, we're going to go down here to Agents and Build Agents. Now, there's another way to get here. You can also just go to Start Building and come down to Build Agentic Applications. Or you can go to your dashboard, and under dashboard, you can also just go right to Agent Builder. So lots of different ways you can get there. All right, and once we're in Agent Builder, the initial screen we're going to get to is very simple. There will be a button up here saying Create a Workflow, where you can build a chat agent workflow with custom logic and tools. And then down here, if you've created something, you'll see all your workflows here. You'll also see all of your drafts, and you'll see templates. And the templates are a really great way to get kind of a baseline for how they should look. If you get stuck, if you have any questions, let's say document comparison, we can pop this open and it will show us how agents are built in OpenAI Agent Builder. So here's a great example. Now, anytime you see yellow, that's just going to be a note or a sticky note. This lets you know just kind of what's going on. It's a way for you to leave comments or notes for your user. So what's happening in this agent? Well, you have our start or our trigger, and this is going to be based on a chat when you have a user submit 2 documents. There's going to be an agent that triages it to make sure the user submitted 2 similar documents. Then it's going to handle if it needs to compare or if it needs some questions from the users or if the documents were incorrect. If it's able to do a reconciliation, it can propose a reconciliation. That proposal then goes to the user to approve. So this comes back. This is kind of a guardrail, and it puts a human back in the loop. And then the agent will either take the approval if it was approved by the user or rejected. And if it rejects it, it's going to kick back and run through the agent to reconcile or provide an explanation again. So a very simple agent, but again, all of these templates you're going to find here are just really great ways for you to kind of understand how this all works together. There's a structured data one over here. This is really good for when we're working in finance because we're doing a lot of data. So just really good ways to get a feel for how these agents look when they're completed. So now let's open a clean workflow and I'll orient you to kind of what's going on here. So when we open this up, this is the canvas, and the canvas is where we can design and build our agent. It starts off as a blank slate. You'll see we just have start and we just have a draft agent. Now moving around is easy, assuming that you're on the little hand. This lets you just drag around. If you're on the pointer, this will let you select things. Can't drag around here. It's just going to kind of let you select everything. You can go back to dragging. So if you want to move around, make sure you've got the hand. If you want to select things, make sure you've got the pointer. Now, looking up at the top, you'll see right now we're in edit mode. If you want to run your agent, you have to switch to run mode, and then the chat is going to come up. We'll look at that a little bit later. So we'll go back to edit, and there's a lot of different options down the side. So let's go through these one by one. So first of all, agents. This is kind of the core of what we're going to be working with. This is where we'll put our system prompt. This is what's really going to do the reasoning. So this is the agent that lets us pull in a model to do the hard work of this for us. You'll see a lot of different options come up when we click on this, and I'm going to go through all these as we build. I just want to make sure you're familiar with all the buttons, but this is the agent, and this is really the core functionality of the agent builder. Next up is classify. Classify lets us take messages from the chat and sort them into categories, again, using a model. So we'll call this kind of an agent light. This classifier can be really important as we work with things like financial data. Or we'll go ahead and get the classifier out of here. Next up is end. An endpoint allows you to define an output. You'll see there's lots of different options here for the schema of our output. Not every workflow needs to have an endpoint, but endpoints can often be useful if you're using guardrails, if you're using if-then statements. Sometimes you'll want a branch of your workflow to go to an end. So that can be really important, and we'll use some of those later. And then, as we saw in the example, sticky notes just allow you to kind of document what you're doing. Hello world, we'll go back to kind of the classic Microsoft document example. So there's hello world, and that is a sticky note. All it does, it has no functionality in the model other than to let someone working with this or the user know what's going on and how to use it. So those are the core features we'll see here. Next up, we've got tools. File search is going to be absolutely critical for us. File search allows you to go into, as we talked about, vectors and embeddings. This is where you can give that information to the tool so it can look through information and return what your user is asking for. Again, if this isn't clear, go back and recheck module 1. That's where we're going to talk about vectors and embeddings, which is the way that you can translate large quantities of data so an AI tool can understand them. And this is going to be a really core part of doing any finance work because we typically need it to review information that already exists. So that's file search. Next up, we've got guardrails. So we've talked a lot about guardrails because guardrails are how you prevent the tool from going crazy. And again, we're going to go through these in detail. There's lots of different features down here, but this just keeps the model from doing things it shouldn't be doing. This keeps it within the bounds, and this makes sure that we keep all of our compliance teams happy. MCP, what is MCP? It's a model context protocol tool. What that means is that you can link up to other tools and bring data from them into the model. You'll see a couple images here. So we've got Gmail, we've got Teams. There's lots of different options you can bring in. There's MCPs created by OpenAI. These go to Outlook, to Dropbox, to SharePoint. There's also ones created by other developers. You can go into Zapier, Stripe, Shopify, Cloudflare, all kinds of different options. And it just lets you bring data from other tools into this environment to work with it. So if you want to process your emails, if you want a Gmail to be a trigger, if you want to be able to save files to Google Drive, which is something we'll take a look at, all of that is available here. All right, we'll delete that one again. Then there's logic. Now this is going to be just like working in Excel. We're using if-then statements, we're setting conditions. That's what's going to be in the logic. So starting with if-else, this is just like using an if function in Excel. If this happens, do this, then do that. Otherwise, do this. That just lets you do the kind of functionality that we're very used to in Excel. Think about it like Excel, and you'll have no problem working with if-else statements. Next up, we've got while. So what while does is it lets you loop while a condition is true. It lets you take data and run multiple passes through the model if additional context or if additional work is needed. So this just keeps coming back every single time a condition is true. If you need to keep processing data until you get to a false, if you need to keep processing data until you get it to a certain amount that the model has designated, that lets you just keep looping back and back through the model. Otherwise, it's kind of just a one-way workflow. Everything passes through once and it's done. And then user approval. So this is also really a guardrail. This is going to go back to user in the chat and have it confirm or deny the work that it's done so far. Again, this is just another guardrail on top of the guardrails to bring a human back into the loop. So that's user approval. Under data, we've got transform. Transform will be really key to us because this allows us to reshape data. The tools aren't always going to work with data in exactly the way we normally work with it as humans, so we may need to reshape the data, and this will be huge for us as we work with this tool. You can delete that, and then set state. Now, set state starts to get a little more technical, but as we work with things like variables, as we work with creating context that the model can understand, there could be times that we need to set a state and assign a value to a specific variable. So that's what we're going to work with there. And again, all of this I'm going to go through in more detail as we go through the training. A few more things to mention. So as we come up here, we've got the 3 dots. This simply lets you rename, duplicate the agent, or delete it. Be very careful with the delete button. Under settings, so you can set write-only secrets for this. This again gets a little bit technical, but it allows you to kind of lock down the model. This is a compliance feature to make sure that everything is nice and secure. The evaluate button will only come up once we've run, but that lets you look at how the model ran. That's going to be part of our testing process. Under code, this is going to allow us to put our agent into other products if we want to use it elsewhere. This is going to allow us to do it through ChatKit or Agents SDK. So this is the code you would put in to access this model. And then lastly, once we're ready, once we're happy with our testing, the publish button will make this available to users that you designate to share it with. And as I said earlier when we were talking about how the documentation up front is the hardest part, you can see how it is. This is really drag and drop functionality. And a lot of it, there's a few technical things like transform and state and some things that need configuration like the MCP or model context protocol. But largely it's drag and drop and just connecting things together. All that work we did in process mapping, you can see it here now. This is just a process map drawn out that we're connecting to AI models to get the work done for us. That's why it's so important to have this all drawn out and mapped out before we get into it. So now that we have an understanding of how the canvas works, of some of the different features, let's get into building our model. So let's get started with building our AI agent. So we'll come in here. The first thing we'll do is we'll delete this out because we're going to be putting a different step in here next. Once that's deleted out, we'll come up here and just rename this. We'll call this our variance commentary agent. All right, and then we're all ready to get started, but let's refer first to our blueprint. So I'm going to come back here to the AI agent blueprint. So as a reminder, the role of this, it's a monthly variance commentary agent. It's going to analyze actuals versus budget, potentially prior month, for the total company as well as the locations. We're going to identify the variances greater than or equal to $5,000. Determine the favorable or unfavorable finance sign rules, and generate executive-ready commentary. Now, for building right now, we don't need all the responsibilities. This was translated over from the requirements. We want to be aware of the inputs because this is the data we're going to bring in, but what we really need at this moment is the workflow. Now, we're not going to need to do every single thing in the workflow manually because a lot of this has been captured by the system prompt that we wrote, and it's going to bring those instructions into the agent. But what we do need to do is make sure that we tick off all of the major steps. And the first one you'll see here, step 0, is an intake and sanity check. So you can't just dive right into the agent itself. The agent itself will cover, kind of all of these steps right here, but we need to build in input checks to make sure that we're getting good, guarded, valid responses. So let's go ahead over to the agent builder and do that. Now, as we go through each of these nodes, I'll walk you through kind of how to set each one up. By the end of module 5, we should have covered almost everything here, if not everything. So here's our starting point. This is the trigger. This is going to be triggered by the chat. If you remember, we looked at how you can preview this over here. A regular user coming to use this is only going to get the chat. We can see more of this. We can preview it because we're building it, but they're going to kick it off with a chat, and that's what start will be. So from there, we want to first go to guardrails. So you just drag and drop it in just like so, and we'll pull this over. The workflow goes from left to right. There are ways we'll look at where we can kind of branch this off, but it's always going to run from left to right. Want a new step? Just stick it right in the middle there. Okay, so looking at the guardrails. So first of all, there's personally identifiable information. This will stop and remove and redact any personally identifiable information if someone puts it into the chat. So we definitely want that on. Moderation, this will classify and block harmful content. Definitely want to turn that on. Jailbreaking, this will detect attempts or malicious activity that could take the model off task, try to trick the model. Definitely want to turn that on. Hallucinations, this is a great feature to prevent hallucinations, but it requires you to give it a database to check against. We're going to take a close look at this in Module 5, where we're going to provide some additional context and guardrails, but here we don't need to do so. We'll leave that off. NSFW text, definitely want to turn that on, make sure that everything going in is appropriate. The URL filter, you can give it a list of URLs to not go to when it searches. We don't need that right now. And then prompt injection, this is another way to try to trick the model. We don't need to turn that on, but good to know it's there. And then a custom prompt check, you can always build in custom functionality if you want to. On almost every node, you're going to see this continue on air. Don't touch that. This is going to cause you a lot of issues. It's a very advanced feature. Definitely don't do that until you've gotten very used to agents, and even then probably still don't do it. So our guardrails are set up. So if it passes all the guardrails, it's going to follow this. Remember as to how it could branch. If it passes all the guardrails, it's going to follow the pass node. If it fails, it's going to follow the fail node. And so we're going to actually pull end down here. So if it fails, we want it to end and just go back to the user in the chat. But if it passes, we want to come over and build our first agent. This agent is going to validate that all of our data is good, usable financial data. So we'll drag that over to pass. We're going to call this our validation agent. All right, starting with instructions. So starting with instructions, this is not where our system prompt is going to go. This is going to be a much lighter instruction, but the instructions box is what guides the behavior of the agent. So what we want to do is we want to review the files provided to ensure they represent financial data. Then we want to choose one, financial or other, and this will make more sense in a second. Coming down the options, we want to include the chat history. This means that it can remember what you've discussed before. You definitely want to do that. In case you failed a guardrail or in case you hit another issue and the user needs to restart, the model will know where it is and not lose track. Next up is model. Now you can choose any model from OpenAI here. So many different options, including all of the deep research models. But what I recommend is you use whatever is the default model in ChatGPT at the time. Right now that's 5.2, so we'll stick on that. That's probably going to be all you need. There are situations where you may want to change that up, but that's probably all you need. Reasoning effort is going to be the amount of time it spends on this. This is the amount of time it could think, and you're going to constrain it so it runs faster, uses less tokens, what have you. So the run from none, low, medium, high, X high, you will rarely want to use high or extra high. In this case, we're going to put it on low. We want to have a little bit of reasoning, but we don't want it to go crazy because we just need it to review it, say, yes, this is good data, and move on. This is not where we need to really be getting the work done. So we'll leave it on low. Now, tools, this is critical. This is where we're going to bring the data in. Now, there's a whole bunch of tools down here. Under ChatKit for Client Tool, you can bring in another AI agent to do work alongside of this. For hosted, you have an MCP or Model Context Protocol server. We looked at this in the nodes. This will let you bring in data from Gmail, from Google Drive, from SharePoint, and we're going to look at that in Module 5. File search will let you go through text files, notably not Excel. This is not what we're going to use to work with Excel files. If you think back to Module 1 with vectors and embeddings, file search will go through vectors and embeddings. The web search will let you go out to the internet to pull in additional information or context for the model. The code interpreter, this is what we're going to use for Excel because this lets the model run Python, which can analyze and work with your Excel files. File search can technically do CSVs, but not in a data analytics way. You still want to use code interpreter if you're working with any kind of data. There's image generation. You can pull in images along the way, and then some local functions, customs, and a development environment. That gets pretty advanced down there. So we'll pull in our code interpreter, and I'm going to attach two files here. Now, you may be saying that's not very automatic if I have to attach files. That's because I'm focused right now on showing you the first agent, showing you how we translate a process map into an agent, and showing you kind of the bones and the structure of it. But in Module 5, we're going to link this all up so it automatically sources the data. But right now, we want to focus on just getting our first agent to run so you can see the end-to-end process. So we'll select our two files here. So I've got our F9 Finance Coffee Shop financials and point of sale, and I'll show you these in a moment. In all of the examples we're going to do here, we're going to be looking at the F9 Finance Coffee Shop. It's a chain of 3 coffee shops that has all the relevant data you need. We've got financial data, our marketing spend, our cost of sales, our labor, our revenue, and on the other side, we have our transaction data, all that point of sale data that we can work with, items sold, types of items sold, times, things like that. So we'll add those in. Let me go ahead and show you the two files. So our first file here is our transaction file. You can see we've got organized by transaction ID and date, as well as the time. We have the quantity, the store ID and location, and then details about our products, and then kind of more common language, month, weekday, and hour based on the date and the time. So that's our point of sale data. Lots of data there for us to work with. The other file we've got to work with is our coffee shop financials. So we've got our accounts, which is our cost of sales, labor, marketing, rent, sales, revenue, utilities. We've got our version, which is our budget and our actuals. Our 3 locations, Astoria, Hell's Kitchen, Lower Manhattan. Clearly this is in New York. Month is going to range from January to June 2023, and then all the values. So those are the 2 files we'll be working with throughout our examples. Let's go ahead and close that out. So we've got that all attached to our validation agent. Next, we need to do our output format. So you can output through text, JSON, or a widget. We're going to use JSON, and let me take a moment to walk you through what JSON is. You may not be familiar with JSON. I know I certainly wasn't when I started working with agents because it's a little bit more of a developer tool. But I want to use this opportunity, instead of putting up a slide and explaining JSON to you, to show you how to get unstuck when you come across terms you're not familiar with, how you can learn really anything that you need as you go through this process. And that's to use ChatGPT. And there's a great prompt we can use. Simply say, explain JSON as explain JSON in a way that a 5th grader would understand. And 5th grade is perfect for the models because it's going to come back. If you think about that show, Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader? It's coming back with concepts that are complex enough that it's going to give you the information you need to understand it. But it's also going to be simple enough that all of that technical jargon is going to come out. You're going to get really good metaphors, really good anecdotes, really good examples. So it's the perfect prompt to use. So we'll pop this in and we'll let ChatGPT explain it. All right, it's already coming back. So JSON is just a simple way to organize information so computers can understand it easily. Think of it like a super organized list with labels. Imagine you have a backpack and inside it you keep things with names so you don't forget what's what. And JSON does the same for computers. So here's how JSON would describe a person. Name is Alex. Age is 10. Favorite ice cream is chocolate. So you have the label, the answer, the label, the answer, so on and so forth. It's a neat rule-based way computers and importantly, AI tools love. Another example, think of it like a labeled box. Why do computers love it? It's neat, it's clean, and all of the computers and AI tools agree on the rules. Prevents them from arguing. And then just a final 1 sentence, it's a clean, organized way to write information using labels and values. So that's what JSON is. It's a way to structure data into objects that can be passed along through different computer systems. And this is what we're going to use to pass data along through our agent. So again, anytime you get stuck, if you get stuck building the agent, if you come across terminology you're not aware of, Ask ChatGPT, use the fifth grader prompt. It will explain pretty much anything you ever wanted to know. So we're going to set up JSON. So it's automatically going to name it for us. I usually just take the name it's giving me, and then we're going to add a property. Now, you can feed in multiple things. You can feed in a string, you can feed in a numerical, a Boolean, an object, an array. We're going to use enum, which is going to let us feed a list in. We're going to call this property validation. You can absolutely add a description, no need to though. And then we're going to type in our values. Our values are going to come from our prompt. This is why we were so specific about the output. And this is because we're going to use an if-else statement next. So we want the values to be financial. Make sure it is case sensitive. I've made that mistake many times. Financial and other. So now this is what we'll pass along to the next node. A few more options down here. I usually am not touching these. You can adjust the verbosity. You can adjust the summary length. You can do some stuff to work with ChatKit. And then we also see down here that continue on air. Don't touch that. And write to conversation history. So our validation agent set up. Now we're going to do an if-else statement. Now this is going to work just like Excel. You only have to define true if you have two options. You don't need to define false. It will just go down false if it's not true. The only time you would need to hit this add button comes up if you have multiple. So let's say I wanted to say there could be financial data, legal data, marketing data, other. Then I would go like this and I'd have financial, legal, marketing, and then everything else would default here. But if it's just true, false, we can do it this way. Now, when I click in the box, you're going to see our validation JSON come up. We can go ahead and click that. We do 2 equal signs. I don't know why we do 2 equal signs. I'm sure there's a great developer reason I could look up. But for now, we'll just say we know we need it. We'll type in financial because that's what we want to pass. And there we go. Make sure there's no errors. We are good. So now our if-else statement is set up. If it's else, if it's not financial data, we want it to end, right? Because these are our 2 guardrails. We're making sure that nothing bad goes in the chat, and we're making sure the data is good, usable financial data. So there's the end. Then if it's good, this is when we build our agent. We'll go ahead, we'll just call this agent. Now we're going to set it up just like before, except here is where we're going to use the system prompt. So I'll go back over to Word, and I'm going to get my system prompt that we created earlier. We'll copy this, and we're going to paste the system prompt into instructions. Okay, now here we want to turn the reasoning effort. We want to let it go up to a medium reasoning effort because this is where the work is going to get done. This is where we're going to be evaluating and analyzing the data. Tools, we're going to again add the code interpreter. We're going to reattach our files. Now you may be saying it's not, again, that efficient to reattach the files. Don't worry. When we get more advanced in the next module, we'll have all the files flowing through here easily. But right now, we're just going to do this manually to focus on the core of the agent. So we'll attach our 2 files in. Point of sale will take a second longer because there's more data. Okay, we'll go ahead and add those in. Our output format is text, yes, because we want this to be kind of a copy and paste text, and nothing we need to change down here. So that is our agent, and once the agents run, we can simply end the process. So there we go. That is what it takes to build an agent. So now if you look at this and think back to our process map, we've got our trigger, we've got our guardrails here. We're making sure everything is good. We're doing the inputs and the processing in the agent, and then we're generating an output. So by doing all of that work up front, by drawing out the process map, by drawing out all of the information we would need, by writing our blueprint, by writing our system prompt, it becomes as simple as drag and drop and just translating that blueprint and the system prompt into the nodes you see here. So this is the structure. Now in the next module, when we do a more advanced one, as you start building your own, it's the same structure every time. You're just adding in more bells and whistles, like automatically sourcing data files. But this is the structure. By building a process map, you can build an agent. The prep work gets 70% of the work done, and then it's just dragging and dropping. So now what's left is to test it. One of the most important and most often overlooked steps is to refine. You need to run your model, review the output, and refine. Agents are not run and done. After you've reviewed the output, you may need to tighten the rules. You may need to tweak your system prompt. You may find that it needs different data that you haven't given it. So make these corrections, tighten it up, and then rerun it. Think of it like training a junior analyst or an intern. Giving fast feedback creates fast improvement. So let's go ahead and test it. We'll click over here to our run. So again, this is our preview. The user would just see chat. They're also just going to see kind of the output. We're going to see everything run. So let's say, please write variance commentary for June 23 budget versus actuals. All right, we'll send that away, and we're going to watch the agent start running. So right now it's on the guardrail step. It's past the guardrails. It's moved to validation agent. I love how you can just kind of watch it move along here, and it should be able to move along the whole process. So the validation agent reasoned very quickly, said, hey, is this financial data? I'm going to look at it. Yes, it is financial data, and I'm going to move on. Now we're on the core agent. Again, it's just so cool how you can just see this move along here. And now the core agent is running. So the core agent, we gave it medium reasoning power. It's probably going to do a lot. It's starting its plan and running Python. Remember, that's the key difference between a generative AI chatbot and an agent, is that it can plan and run different steps along the way towards a goal. You don't need to prompt and respond. So it's going to keep running. It's going to keep evaluating what it's getting back and then determine the next step to take. All right, so we've got some Python running. Now it's inspecting the data context, seeing what it has available, running more Python. Then it's coming down to analyze our data drivers, running more Python. Now it's filtering the financial data. And think about all of this work that's happening. First of all, this work is happening on someone else's server. This isn't locking down your computer the way it would if you were doing advanced analysis in Excel. You can start this process and go do something else. The other thing is, think about how many steps this is, right? This is an entire analyst's week at month end, evaluating and parsing this data. And the agent's just going through here, planning and running it all on its own. All right, now it's analyzing the sales data. It's running the Python code. It's looking into the store location so it can understand the 3 locations. Now, mind you, we didn't tell the agent what the locations were. It's pulling this all up on its own. You see it's already evaluating the data. I mean, it's really getting in there. We're running Python code again. Now it's analyzing the sales performance, running some more Python. Now it's calculating the P&L variances. And if you remember when I said we don't have to tell the agent every single step in the blueprint, it's coming up with all the variance calculations on its own. It can find that information. So you'll see it's going to do all that work, and we don't need to explicitly do each step. Here's all of our variance formulas. That was an entire step all on its own in the blueprint. Calculating revenue and expenses. Now we're calculating financial metrics, running more code, computing cost of goods sold, running more Python code. Now it's calculating the variances, running more code, calculating operating profit. Very good. We only gave it revenue and expenses, so it's going ahead to calculate the profit. More code. Now it's analyzing the transaction data, more code. Now it's computing the details of all the transactions and running some code. Analyzing sales. Remember, we have a file that has transactions and a file with revenue, so now it's linking those up. It's working on structuring our slide information for us, running some more Python code. It's evaluating our labor variances, running more code, calculating variances, running more code. Think about how long it would have taken 6 months ago or a year ago to write all this code, right? Someone would have been sitting down writing this out manually. Now the AI is running it and evaluating the output. How cool is that? Calculating sales and costs, running some more code. Now we're looking at profit metrics. Again, running some more code. So much, just it's writing its own code, it's running it, it's evaluating it all on its own. Calculating gross profit, running the Python code. Now it's going to organize all of our financial data for us. So I think we're getting closer to getting our data back. Formatting the financial summary. Yep, we are just about there. So here's what it looks like we're going to get back. So it did the total company. Now it's doing the individual locations. Preparing an audit appendix for us. That's awesome. That's one of our guardrails we gave it to be able to be auditable and track all the numbers. Now it's crafting the presentation. And here it comes back. June 2023 actual versus budget. And here's our total company. There's our appendix. Here's our individual locations, saying here's our slide text. Operating profit, sales revenue, outperformance across all locations. Cost of goods sold rate was a little bit higher versus budget. And June point of sale activity, 35,000 transactions, broken down by location. Now, what you'll notice here is it's not adding any extraneous details we didn't provide. We didn't give a context file. We wanted to just kind of see the core functionality run, and it followed the guardrails from the system prompt. It didn't make anything up. It did not hallucinate. So that's perfect. Have the same breakdown by location. So it did all of that parsing and analysis for us with Python. And then we have our audit log. So these are the numbers it got, and we can go spot check these. As we've been talking about, you want the AI agent to do 80%. You want to do the last 20%. Just like you would check the work of an intern, a junior analyst, an analyst, you want to check AI's work because there could be something that goes screwy. And this audit appendix is exactly what you want because these numbers are what's driving the commentary. So you can spot check these values to make sure everything's looking good against your actual books. And that's all there is to it. We've tested it. It works. We could certainly go in and tweak it, but we'll save that for module 5 when we get more advanced. But again, if you can write a process map, you can build an agent. That's what there is to it. So at this point, you've crossed a major line. You no longer use AI, you build agents. You now have a blueprint, a structured system prompt, guardrails, knowledge, and you've seen a working prototype. Next up, we're going to take this agent and wire it into your real workflow so it saves you time automatically, not just when you remember to open ChatGPT.